I'm Melita Easters, the Executive Director and Founding Chair of Georgia Win List. Our Board of Directors is delighted to announce our endorsement of Representative Bee Nguyen for her 2022 campaign for Georgia Secretary of State. Win List first endorsed her for a 2017 special election to House District 89. She made history as the first Vietnamese-American to serve in the General Assembly. While Representative Nguyen may be small in stature, she is bold when tough stands are required. She garnered national respect in 2020 with the careful research she used to relentlessly cross-examine Trump attorneys who challenged Georgia voter rolls. In the glare of worldwide attention, she responded eloquently following the spa shooting tragedy of March 2021. Representative Nguyen, please tell us what prompts you to seek the Secretary of State office.
Well, thank you so much, Melita, and thank you, Georgia Win List. You know, when I think about the Secretary of State's office, it's very much like the decisions that I've made in my life previously, which is it's an extension of the work that I've already been doing. It was not part of my plan to run for Secretary of State, but as a sitting lawmaker, I have been on the Governmental Affairs Committee, the committee that oversees election law. And as long as I've been elected, every single year, there has been some effort to introduce legislation, and in some cases, pass legislation to make it harder for Georgians to vote. But nothing like I saw last year. The outright attempts to overturn the results of the 2020 election, the subversion of democracy, and then following January 6th, the attempts to deny peaceful transfer of power. Instead of changing the direction of where our country is heading, Georgia Republicans focused on one thing and one thing only: Senate Bill 202, a bill that does make it harder to vote, but it also opens the door for the subversion of democracy. So I think that this is one of the most important issues and one of the most important seats that we will be voting on in Georgia next year.
Thank you. The Secretary of State is most closely identified with elections, of course, but the office has many other responsibilities. Could you give us a brief outline?
Sure. The Secretary of State's office encompasses several divisions, including corporations, charities, securities, and licensures, as well as funeral services. All of these are instrumental into the day-to-day life of Georgians. So I think there's tremendous opportunities to make improvements to all of the divisions, specifically focusing on economic opportunities for small business owners and also focusing on consumer protection, so that we are really looking out for seniors and other vulnerable citizens. So when they go to invest their money in charities, we know they are not putting them into fraudulent charities. When people are investing their money in securities, we know that we are protecting the resources of Georgians.
You were an early opponent of SB 202, a Republican-backed elections bill, also nicknamed Jim Crow 2.0. Based on the recent municipal elections, is the impact of this bill as bad as Democrats feared?
Yes, and what we saw in the municipal elections is just a small sampling of what is to come when we are going to be entering into statewide elections. Most significantly are the restrictions around the ability to vote absentee ballot. What we saw was timeline restrictions on when you're able to request and when you are able to receive an absentee ballot, as well as cumbersome ID provisions. And we saw an increase in the rate of rejections of people who were trying to vote by mail. And of those people who were rejected because of the timeline restrictions or because of ID requirements, only 26% of them ended up voting in person. So certainly this is exactly the type of voter suppression that we feared. And I expect these numbers to increase when we are looking at statewide elections.
Please share your vision for how you might improve the Secretary of State operation.
Look, so I think the most important thing when it comes to the Secretary of State's office is the elections division and electing somebody who is going to certify the results of the election, whether or not she likes them. That is foremost the most fundamental thing. But there are other improvements to be made across the board. And my vision is to invest in all 159 local election boards and adequately train our election workers so that they can run efficient elections in all of our 159 counties. Two is to invest in voter communications and ensure that when voters are pegged to be purged off the voter rolls, that they have adequate notice so that they can respond. We must act in good faith to keep eligible voters on the roll, as well as inform them of things like precinct closures or consolidations, which happens across the state of Georgia. The third component is investing in language access. I am somebody who grew up in a household where English was our second language. If we were to do things like invest in translating the Secretary of State's portal for absentee ballot application or voter registration into the top spoken languages in the state of Georgia, we automatically increase access, and we recognize the diversity of our state, and it does not require legislative change. As Secretary of State, I would create a division that solely focuses on mitigating election disinformation, cybersecurity, and foreign interference with our elections. Election disinformation is one of the greatest threats that we are currently facing. This division would hire top-notch security experts who would work with federal, state, and local law enforcement to identify threats and mitigate those threats when they come in. But in addition, this division would also brief and work closely with all 159 local election boards, so they are also equipped to mitigate the threats that are coming into our elections division.
Thank you. A bold vision. Your family has a remarkable story. Please share a bit about yourself and how your family's journey influences your attitudes about public service.
Well, my family, my parents are refugees who fled Vietnam in the late 70s, and they fled because they were in search of civil liberties that they did not have in their country, specifically the freedom of speech, the freedom of press, the freedom to assemble, and the right to free and fair elections. Before my family was able to make it to America, my dad was held in re-education camp. He was imprisoned by his own government for 3 years and subjected to starvation and hard labor. And this has always been instrumental in framing my life decisions and going into a life of service with the understanding that my parents sacrificed everything in order for me to have a better life here in America. It's what led me to work in public schools for 10 years through a nonprofit I created. It's what led me to run for office in 2017 and serve in the legislature. But I think fundamentally what is important here is it provides me with a framework in which I recognize something that happened to my parents in their country could very well happen here in America if we do not continue this fight to preserve our democracy. When I was growing up, my parents would say to me, look, all the signs were there, the writing was on the wall, but we never ever thought that we would lose our country. And that is something that has given me the ability to understand the imminent threats that we are facing here. All the writing is on the wall. The signs are there. We only have a few chances to get this right. And if we do not make the decisions that we need to make now, like electing a Democratic Secretary of State, specifically somebody like me, who has been fighting for our democracy and upholds the law and understands the nuances of election laws, we're going to be in trouble for a very long time. So I often think of them, this fight to build a better life in a country that has civil liberties, and understanding that our civil liberties are not guaranteed and that we cannot let our guard down when it comes to fighting for the future of our country.
Thank you. Representative Nguyen, what do you see the Democratic ticket offering to Georgia voters in 2022, which they have not seen during the recent 2 decades when Republicans have held a trifecta of state government control?
Melita, I have to say I'm extremely excited about our 2022 statewide ticket and the potential of building one that actually looks like the state of Georgia. First, with having Senator Warnock on top of our ticket, having Stacey Abrams as our gubernatorial nominee, and understanding that the people who hold office should reflect the greater diversity of our state. Georgia Democrats have also been the people who have been fighting to give Georgians health care, to combat a public pandemic, to ensure that we are protecting the right to vote, to ensure we are protecting our public education. And what we see on the other side of the aisle, they do not have the ideas to move Georgia forward. And because they don't have them, what they have done is they double down on the big lie, and they're making it harder for the will of the people to be heard. They don't have the policy ideas, so they are trying to win by cheating.
Well, let's have you close out by sharing how those interested in your campaign can support your efforts and get involved.
So obviously running a statewide campaign is a completely different beast from running a state house campaign. So for folks who are willing, contributing financially is obviously very important so that I can get the word across the state of Georgia, but also volunteering with the campaign. If you have a skill set that you think is important to the campaign, we welcome volunteers. And my favorite thing also is direct voter contacts. So if you would like to canvass, phone bank, text bank in language or in English, in other languages or in English, there are opportunities on our campaign to do that. And then lastly, spread the word with your family and your friends and people across the state of Georgia. The website is www.beforgeorgia.com. Everything's spelled out. The Twitter handle is the same and the Facebook is the same. And so is Instagram, Be for Georgia.
Thank you so much. On behalf of the entire Win List community, we wish you well in your campaign and we thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Melita and Georgia Win List.